Power illuminates. But what happens when that power is not a burst of fire or a planet-killing beam, but a quiet line of contained light humming softly in the dark? The answer is the lightsaber, a calm thread of energy drawn from the same mystical force that binds the galaxy together. The story of the lightsaber is not only a tale of duels and death, it is a slow, continuous presence that would shape galactic history for thousands of years, across the span of empires and forgotten eras. The Force moves as a gentle current. Stars are born and die. Worlds rise and fall. Jedi and Sith live brief, intense lives, chasing power and purpose. Yet through all of that, one sound returns again and again, a low, steady hum. A blade of focused plasma held in the hand, a weapon that is also a symbol, a tool that is also a question about the balance between the dark side and the light side. The popular image of the lightsaber is frantic motion, flashing colors, and desperate clashes in the middle of war. But the deeper history of this weapon begins in silence, long before the Republic was stable, long before the Clone Wars or the fall of any empire. Ancient Force wars and early experiments produced crude cable-bound protosabers, heavy hilts tethered to external power packs, dragging behind their wielders. Every ignition was an effort, every swing a reminder that this was still an idea, struggling to fully exist over time. Those awkward devices became something else. Kyber crystals that resonated with the Force were discovered and studied, their song shaping the color and character of each blade. Unaligned crystals remained quiet until bonded through focused attunement. Then the light appeared not as a roar, but as a calm extension of the will. Sith alchemists twisted that same process. Synthetic or bled Kyber crystals produced harsh red blades, unstable edges, and a different kind of hum, colder, more menacing yet still part of the same long continuum from double-bladed sabers first perfected in ancient Sith, strongholds to experimental crossguards, and the singular Darksaber forged among Mandalorians. Every new form carried echoes of what came before. What followed was not a random collection of curiosities, but a slow evolving language of design and intent. Each ignition across the ages was less a shout and more a page, turning in a chronicle written in light. So what does it mean that one basic design, a hilt focusing energy through a crystal into a contained blade, has survived extinctions, purges, and the collapse of entire orders? What forgotten hands refined the early power cells, who risked unstable reactions to shorten the cable, who first realized that a blade could fold or spin or split in two? This calm journey will trace that entire arc, from the first unstable sparks of protosabers to the rare refined weapons of the modern era. It is meant to be heard slowly, as the mind drifts, following that soft hum through battles, treaties, exiles, and rebirths, until the lightsaber is no longer only a weapon, but a quiet companion through 25,000 years of galactic history. How to listen to a blade, setting tone, method, and map of the timeline. To follow that companion across millennia, the pace here will remain steady and unhurried. There will be no sudden jumps across centuries without warning, no sharp turns into obscure lore with no way back. Instead, the story of the lightsaber will move in a calm, chronological line from the first unstable plasma blades to the weapons carried in the Age of Starkiller base. Each era announced each transition clear enough that the thread can be found again. Even if attention drifts for a moment, this means the rhythm will feel closer to a bedtime chronicle than a frantic battle report. Descriptions will linger on the color of a blade, the weight of a hilt, the faint pull of a Kyber crystal in the Force. Rather than racing through every minor skirmish, the focus will rest on how the weapon itself changes, how its sound, its shape, and its meaning would shape the warriors who carried it and the orders that rose and fell around it in terms of time. The path stretches roughly 25,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, beginning in the mythic age of the early Force Wars, when protosabers were heavy experimental tools bound to external power packs by thick cables. From there, the narrative will enter the Old Republic era, where Jedi and Sith first standardized the weapon across great galactic conflicts. then moved through the High Republic with its elegant gold and white hilts, the Clone Wars with mass deployment and specialized variants, the Dark Age of the Empire and Inquisitorius, and finally, the fragile post-Imperial period beyond Endor. Throughout this journey, the method will alternate between wide views and close focus. Broad eras will be sketched, first showing how technology, philosophy, and war pressures the design of the blade. Then the lens will tighten around specific sabers and wielders, an ancient double-bladed Sith weapon held in a tomb, a Jedi Guardian staff, saber on the frontier, a Mandalorian Darksaber humming over a throne world. What followed was not just a catalogue of models, but a chain of personal choices etched into metal and crystal. Beneath all of this runs a simple idea. The lightsaber is a mirror. When a Jedi crafts a calm, single-bladed weapon with a stable crystal, it reflects discipline and trust in the light side. When a Sith bleeds a Kyber until it screams red, the same core technology becomes a conduit for rage and fear. Mandalorians seize that power and forge the Darksaber as a symbol of rule. Others twist the design into spinning rings or jagged, unstable monstrosities. Each culture, each order sees its own reflection in the blade. It carries into conflict over time. The path ahead will reveal stranger shapes, early Protosabers that overheated and failed, half-finished crossguards that foreshadow later legends, experimental Sith constructs that spat unstable plasma and were buried in forgotten vaults. What? They found they would change everything for the next 1,000 years. Even standard hilts would carry faint echoes of those prototypes. And when the next section opens, the first sparks of that ancient experimentation will ignite on battlefields no modern Jedi would recognize before the first spark. The Force, metal, and the dream of a light blade. In the ages before that first reliable spark, there was only metal and the Force, long before a humming blade of light could be held in the hand warriors crossed battlefields with steel swords, durasteel polearms and crude energized edges. The galaxy already knew war, but it did not yet know the lightsaber. In those early millennia, the Force was a mystery whispered about in scattered cultures across the galactic disk. Some Force-sensitive orders carried ceremonial blades, hammered and folded with almost religious care. Others inched toward energy weapons, heavy rifles that spat bolts of contained plasma or shock pikes that crackled with power. But the dream of a contained beam, a sword of focused light, remained only an intuition on certain worlds. That dream began to take on shape. Kyber-rich planets and moons hid crystals that did more than refract light. They resonated in the Force. They sang to those who could hear. Over time, mystics noticed that meditation near these crystals sharpened perception and steadied emotion. Some carved them into talismans. Others set them into the hilts of ordinary swords, claiming the blades moved more easily through the air when the wielder opened fully. To the Force, was this only legend, or the first proof that focused energy and consciousness were intertwined? What followed was a slow convergence of philosophy and necessity. As populations expanded and hyperdrive travel-stitched distant systems together, conflicts escalated into organized war on worlds that would one day be spoken of only in footnotes. Proto-Jedi traditions argued over how the Force should be used. Some insisted on restraint and harmony. Others demanded that power be harnessed aggressively to end conflict quickly. These early schisms, the first faint shadows of the light side and dark side, would shape everything that came after. During the era remembered in fragments as the Force Wars rival sects clashed across entire continents. Force sensitives still fought with metal blades and primitive blasters, but their expectations had changed. They wanted weapons that were not only efficient, but symbolic extensions of doctrine. A staff for the contemplative, a curved sword for the duelist, an energized cutting edge for those who believed the Force should burn away opposition. The idea of a weapon that could literally manifest focused energy grew more tempting with every battle. Yet technology could not keep pace. Bulky power cells could drive ship-mounted cannons, but not a handheld beam. Early attempts to stabilize plasma fields produced only short-lived arcs that guttered or exploded. Engineers and sages experimented with containment. Rings, backpacks, wired to gauntlets and unstable cutting torches. None could maintain a coherent plasma edge in motion. Not yet still, the dream persisted, somewhere in this crucible of war meditation and failed experiments. The first clear vision emerged a sword of pure light, balanced by a crystal that sang in harmony with the Force, its hum steady, its edge perfect for thousands of years. That vision would haunt artificers and prophets alike. And in the next age, one order would finally dare to ignite it on a battlefield that would not be ready. The Age of Protosabers, cables, power packs, and the first light blades, that battlefield was not yet ready for elegance. Instead, it received something harsher, the first attempt to drag that perfect vision of a light blade into brutal reality power corrupts. But what happens when that power is channeled through raw plasma, barely held in place by the Force? The answer is the Age of the Protosaber. In the earliest years after that vision spread, through temples and war councils, artificers produced weapons that were more engine than sword. The Protosaber was a handheld emitter assembly, connected by a thick insulated cable to an external power pack worn on the belt or across the back. When activated, the hilt spat out a short-lived, yet utterly lethal plasma blade, a bar of contained energy that could melt through primitive armor and shields before failing with a hiss. These were not yet the refined instruments of later Jedi and Sith orders, but they proved something crucial. A personal energy blade was possible. On the ground, these first light blades felt less mystical and more mechanical. Warriors dragged power cables through mud ash and shattered duracrete. The lines snagged on debris, wrapped around limbs, and were yanked taut in the crush of melee blades, flickered under strain as power cells overheated or connections shook loose. A duelist might step wrong and feel the sudden slack of a half-severed cable. The next moment, the blade guttered, leaving only a dead hilt in a storm of metal and fire. There was always the constant risk that a misjudged parry would shear through one's own lifeline, ending the fight in an instant. At the heart of these unstable tools lay the first true integration of Kyber crystals. Early engineers and Force mystics learned that Kyber resonated with the Force and could focus raw plasma into a blade, but their methods were crude. Crystals were often imperfectly aligned or poorly attuned. The result was an erratic, sputtering edge that shivered with every motion. Maintaining a stable blade demanded intense concentration, as much meditation as marksmanship. A distracted warrior felt the weapon waver in the hand, a moment's lapse, and the light side or dark side current through the crystal faltered. The story of the Protosaber is also the story of those who dared to carry it early. Jedi orders used them as experimental sidearms during border skirmishes and internal schisms rival Force sects on. Distant worlds adopted them to prove spiritual superiority over steel, while certain Old Republic military units fielded Protosaber-equipped shock troops to break enemy lines. What followed was a series of costly trials. Some hailed the weapons as the future, others saw only unreliable hazards. Despite every flaw, the concept refused to die. Each engagement demonstrated that a single warrior, bearing a blade of energy, could challenge armor columns and champion duelists alike. Over time, artificers improved power packs, refined focusing matrices, and recorded hard-won lessons from burned-out hilts and lost battles. This primitive age would shape the doctrines of both Jedi Guardians and Sith Enforcers for thousands of years, and in the next era, the demand for greater mobility and endurance would drive the final step, the moment when the power pack vanished into the hilt and the modern lightsaber truly arrived. From burden to symbol, Protosabers in early Jedi conflicts, as those external packs shrank and the focusing matrices grew more reliable. The Protosaber left the workshop and stepped fully onto the battlefield. The story of this transition is not only technical, it is psychological. In the earliest Force Wars, only a scattering of warriors on each side carried humming blades of contained light. They moved among ranks of armored infantry and lumbering war machines as rare points of color and sound on those ancient plains. The glow of a single Protosaber could draw every eye in the chaos of blaster fire and primitive artillery. Its wielder became both spearhead and target enemy. Commanders quickly learned that wherever the humming blade advanced, morale faltered and formations bent. But they also learned that killing the warrior with the power pack meant silencing that terror at its source. What followed was a brutal education in vulnerability. early Jedi and their dark counterparts adapted or died, the cable that tethered blade to pack turned into a lifeline and a weakness so new. Fighting styles emerged: guarded stances with the offhand instinctively shielding the belt unit, tight formations in which shield carriers and range specialists screened the Protosaber forward charges, where the blade only committed once allies had secured its flanks. In these engagements, the Force Warrior stopped being a lone duelist and became the core of a small moving phalanx. Over time, this dependence on others would shape doctrine as much as design. The Jedi, in particular, began to codify roles around the fragile weapon. One fighter focused on deflection and close combat. Another watched for snipers aiming at the pack. A third extended battle meditation to steady the group in the crush of war. The Protosaber was less a personal sidearm and more a shared responsibility, a symbol of trust within the unit. Yet even in this clumsy phase, the sight of a blade of light carried a weight. No forge-tempered sword could match to soldiers raised on metal and slug throwers a humming line of energy that, carved through armor and stone, seemed closer to myth than to infantry. It suggested a direct channel to the Force itself, a visible thread between mortal and cosmic power. Is it any surprise that tales of these warriors spread faster than accurate reports of the battles they actually fought within the early Jedi enclaves? This growing mystique sparked debate. Some argued that such temperamental weapons should be rare, entrusted only to those whose discipline and spiritual focus were beyond question. Others envisioned entire orders of guardians bearing Protosabers as a living wall between the galactic populace and chaos in the shadows of ruined fortresses. Their dark rivals reached a different conclusion. The blade was not a burden to be shared, but a path to dominance, a tool to break fear and loyalty from those who witnessed it. As these arguments deepened, so did the divide between traditions that saw the luminous blade as an instrument of balance and those that saw only conquest and wile. Engineers worked to bury the power pack inside the hilt. Philosophers and warlords alike realized something more enduring. The weapon had already escaped their control. It had become an idea, and in the next age that idea would travel far beyond any battlefield. Breaking the cable, the leap to self-contained lightsabers. In the centuries that followed the Protosaber's rise, the weapon's greatest weakness was no longer its cutting power, but its leash engineers. Philosophers and generals all understood the same problem. How could a weapon that embodied the freedom of the Force be chained to a cable? The answer began not with one miracle breakthrough, but with thousands of quiet refinements made in hidden workshops and temple vaults across the galactic core around this period. Advances in industrial energy research started to filter into Jedi and Republic arsenals. Power cell miniaturization had been driven by starfighter and droid development. But what followed was a deliberate effort to bend that progress toward a single purpose, shrinking the power pack until it could disappear inside a hilt. Magnetic containment fields were refined so they could stabilize a plasma blade in a much tighter envelope while consuming less energy. At the same time, Kyber specialists within the Jedi Order experimented with crystal lattices that aligned more efficiently with the light side, allowing the crystal to mediate the flow of power instead of fighting it. The first generation of self-contained sabers emerged from this convergence. They were heavy by later standards, with thick hilts sheathed in heat sinks and venting ridges. They still overheated in prolonged duels, and many carried emergency cutoffs to prevent catastrophic failure. Yet for the first time, the wielder moved without a trailing cable. There was no external pack to slice, no tether to entangle in rubble or armor plates on ancient battlefields, from the outer rim to the deep core. This changed everything about how Jedi and Sith closed the distance combat forms adapted almost overnight. Earlier, Proto-Saber fighting had resembled shield and pike warfare, measured advances, careful guards, and constant awareness of the vulnerable line of power. Now acrobatics that had once been theory leapt into reality. Warriors could vault over enemy lines, twist in mid-air, and redirect strikes without worrying about snagging a cord. Rapid repositioning became a discipline in itself. Dueling masters began to trace flowing circles around stunned opponents, and from those circles, the foundations of the classic lightsaber forms would emerge over time. Each style encoded assumptions that were only possible because the blade was finally free within the Jedi Order. the cultural impact ran deeper than tactics. What had started as an experimental battlefield tool began to crystallize into a symbol of knighthood and spiritual focus. Initiates no longer trained merely to manage a temperamental device. They undertook rites of attunement binding Kyber to their presence in the Force. The hilt became a personal scripture engraved in metal and light, a constant reminder that power was meant to serve balance for thousands of years. That association between saber and identity would shape how the galaxy saw the Jedi. But symbols are never owned by one tradition alone. As the Jedi refined this new elegance, others watched warlords, Sith remnants, and shadowed cabals studied the liberated design and asked a different question: if a blade could now be carried anywhere without restraint, what might such a weapon become in hands unburdened by Jedi doctrine in the next age? Those answers would step out of the shadows and ignite in colors the Order had long feared, crystals that sing. Kyber, the Force, and the heart of the blade. Yet beneath every new hilt and every refined chassis lay something far older and far more mysterious, the crystal that made the blade possible. Power can be engineered, but what happens when that power must first awaken? When it must answer to consciousness itself? The answer is the Kyber crystal. In the deep strata of countless worlds, veins of Kyber formed over millennia, semi-sentient lattices of mineral threaded through with the Force. Each crystal vibrated at a unique harmonic, a quiet song that only the most sensitive could perceive. The story of the lightsaber is in many ways the story of learning to hear that song and to shape it without breaking it, when aligned within a focusing chamber. Kyber did not merely conduct energy. It amplified it, refined it, and in rare cases pushed it toward either the dark side or the light side, depending on the will wrapped around it. The earliest Jedi and their precursors discovered this. The hard way, raw Kyber wired into primitive emitters remained stubbornly inert. It sat cold and dull, no matter how much power flowed through the circuits. What followed was a revelation not of technology, but of discipline. Unaligned crystals only stirred when a Force user stilled the mind and reached inward through meditation, through patient attunement. The lattice of the crystal and the lattice of the living consciousness brushed against one another. When that bond finally clicked, the stone began to glow, and the once erratic blade stabilized into a coherent column of plasma over time. This understanding crystallized into ritual. For thousands of years, initiates journeyed to Kyber-rich caverns on worlds such as Ilum Jeddah and later Lothal. They entered in silence, guided by elders, but ultimately alone in the dark. Some faced visions of past failures. Some heard distant whispers. Some simply felt a gentle pull down a side tunnel. What they found there would change everything. Not a crystal they had chosen from a shelf, but one that resonated with their specific presence. The belief took root that the crystal chose the wielder as much as the reverse, and that forcing the match invited disaster. Subtle variations in Kyber told their own quiet histories. Clarity and internal structure affected the purity of the blade's edge. Larger or unusually dense shards produced wider or more forceful beams, some with a higher pitch that hummed sharply in the air, others with a lower steady thrum. Faint impurities or unique resonances shifted color from the calm blues and greens of many Jedi to rare yellows, purples, or the ancient black of the Mandalorian Darksaber. Even cutting power and stability could change a blade, might flare slightly on impact, or remain eerily smooth, depending on the crystal's song. Yet not all who sought crystals were content to be chosen. Some began to ask a darker question if Kyber listened. Could it be made to scream among the Sith and other shadowed traditions? Experiments began to twist and dominate, living crystals flooding them with pain and hatred, until their internal harmony shattered. The result was bled Kyber burning red and howling with a harsher, unstable sound. In the next age, such blades would not only cut through armor, they would scar the very. Silence around them, announcing that the war for the heart of the crystal had truly begun. Forging light, ancient construction rituals, and early sabercraft. Those screaming crystals demanded hosts, and in answer, the galaxy began to standardize the vessel that would carry them. Power is meaningless if it cannot be focused, so ancient artisans asked a simple question: how do you cage a star in the palm of a hand? The answer became the first self-contained lightsabers. In the early millennia of the Republic, when memories of the first great Force wars were still fresh, engineers and mystics stood side by side over workbenches. The old external power packs and trailing cables of the Protosaber era gave way to compact energy cores sealed within the hilt. Inside these early weapons, an emitter matrix shaped the plasma, a focusing lens refined its edge, and modulation circuits kept the blade from tearing itself apart. At the center of it all, seated in a precision-cut chamber, a Kyber, crystals sang quietly to the Force, turning raw power into a coherent beam of light. The story of their construction was never merely technical. Among the emerging Jedi orders, forging a lightsaber became a ritual of controlled surrender. Initiates entered trance-like states, slowing their breath until the hum of the workshop faded and only the current of the Force remained. Components were not simply screwed and welded together. They were aligned at the microscopic level, modulation pathways nudged into perfect harmony. Emitter matrices rotated by fractions of a degree until energy flowed without resistance. Over time, some builders reported that the hilt seemed to assemble itself, drawn together by invisible hands as crystal, lens, and circuits locked into place. For these early Jedi, this was more than craftsmanship. It was a mirror. They believed that any fracture in focus, any unresolved fear or anger, would manifest as a flaw in the weapon. A blade that flickered under stress, a hilt that ran too hot, a subtle instability in the modulation circuits. All were read as signs that the inner self was misaligned with the light side. What followed was a culture in which the first ignition of a completed saber marked not just technical success, but spiritual readiness, a rite of passage as important as any trial in meditation or combat. Yet even in this age of solemn discipline, the weapons were not uniform. Personalized design emerged early, quietly acknowledging that the Force moved through each warrior in a different pattern. Some favored longer hilts for two-handed leverage, others compact grips wrapped in leather or exotic hides for agile, one-handed forms. Emitter shrouds were flared to catch and redirect glancing strikes or narrowed for precise thrusts. Balance points shifted millimeters forward or back to favor sweeping cuts, tight defensive circles, or aggressive lunges. Each saber became a record of its maker's preferred rhythm in battle. This duality, engineering and devotion, standardization and personal imprint would shape galactic history. The Jedi codified careful, patient construction, teaching that a calm mind produced a stable blade. But not every observer shared their restraint. Across the Republic, dissident adepts, future Sith, and ambitious warlords studied the same emitter matrices and power cells and saw opportunities. Where the Jedi sought harmony, others imagined shortcuts, overcharged power cores, unstable crystals, and blades tuned for brutality rather than balance. In the next era, those experiments would push the design of the saber into far darker territory. From tool to identity, the lightsaber becomes the Jedi's soul. In the centuries that followed the first experimental sabers, a quiet transformation began. Power had produced a new weapon, but what happens when that weapon is given only to those sworn to serenity and restraint? The answer is the Jedi lightsaber as identity around the early millennia of the Republic. The Order slowly tightened its customs. At first, any knight on campaign might carry a saber or even loan one to a trusted ally. But over time, the Council grew wary of what an uncontrolled energy blade could do in untrained hands. What followed was a series of rulings and precedents. Only fully initiated Jedi were permitted to bear lightsabers within the Republic. This turned the weapon from an exotic tool into a visible oath, a sign that its bearer had passed trials of discipline, meditation, and responsibility by the High Republic era. The story of the lightsaber within the Order was no longer about technology alone. It was about the self-masters taught that a saber must be an extension of the wielder's connection to the Force, not a badge of rank. Apprentices learned to construct their own blades in quiet rites of passage, guided by mentors, but never handed a finished hilt as a trophy. Crystals were attuned through contemplation, and the emerging doctrine warned. Against ostentation, elaborate decoration was discouraged simple. Functional designs were praised. A Jedi's worth would shape the way the blade moved, not the way the metal shone. As this philosophy deepened, the Jedi also realized that a weightless blade of energy demanded structure. Around 6,000 years before Yavin, formalized combat disciplines began to crystallize. Shicho, the first form, emphasized broad sweeping motions and control of multiple opponents. Makashi refined the art into precise, dueling, elegant thrusts and narrow parries suited to single combat. Later forms, such as Sorasu and Ataru, focused on defense or acrobatic assault. Each style represented a different answer to the same question. How should a servant of the light side wield such concentrated power without letting it rule them? For thousands of years, these forms were drilled in temples and on starship decks until they became moving meditations. The aesthetics of the weapons themselves mirrored this inner order most. Hilts were smooth cylinders or modest assemblies of alloys and leather grips. Emitters were tuned for stability, not spectacle. Even in eras of galactic conflict, when the Jedi marched at the head of clone armies, their sabers remained mostly unadorned. No serrated edges, no screaming, unstable cores. The calm hum of a blue or green blade was meant to reassure witnesses rather than terrify foes. This restraint was not accidental. The Order believed that fear invited the dark side, and that turning the lightsaber into an object of intimidation would blur the line between guardian and conqueror. Yet that very modesty had consequences. Ambitious Force users watched the Jedi carry understated weapons and saw not wisdom, but wasted potential. They imagined crossguards that spat crackling energy, hilts twisted by alchemy, and crystals bled until they burned red. In the next chapter, those dreams of a more terrifying blade would find champions, and the lightsaber would become something far darker than the Jedi ever intended. Dissatisfaction in the light, early schisms and forbidden experiments. In the quiet that followed those first whispers of a darker blade, another tension began to grow within the Jedi Order. Knowledge is power, but what happens when that power is locked behind doctrine and fear? The answer in this era was not the Sith. It was the Jedi themselves arguing over how far the lightsaber should be pushed. Around these early centuries of refinement, factions emerged among temple artificers and battlemasters. Some held that the saber had reached its ideal form, a disciplined extension of the light side, restrained by tradition. Others quietly disagreed. They saw a galaxy hardening into constant conflict, border wars with nascent empires, raiders armed with mass drivers and disruptors, and enemies who did not respect restraint to them. The standard Jedi weapon felt under-realized, a tool held back by caution. What followed was a wave of forbidden curiosity in hidden workshops and remote outposts. Researchers began to treat Kyber crystals in ways the Council had never sanctioned. They experimented with unstable Kyber configurations, pairing multiple crystals in opposing resonance chambers or forcing synthetic shards to harmonize with natural stones. Some pushed power cells beyond safety limits, overcharging capacitors until ignition produced a blade that howled with excess energy rather than humming in calm equilibrium. The story of these experiments was written in flickers and failures. Exotic focusing arrays bent the plasma stream into serrated edges or widened it into brutal cutting fields. Prototypes hinted at forms that would shape infamous weapons. Millennia later, crossguard vents that spat raw energy, double-length emitters that could be mirrored into a staff, and primitive attempts at variable geometry blades that could shift length mid-strike. What they found there would change everything for those who believed the saber should inspire fear as much as respect. Over time, a moral debate crystallized as sharply as the Kyber itself was. It righteous to increase lethality? If the galaxy grew darker, or did every increment of destructive potential draw the wielder closer to the dark side? Some masters argued that refusing to adapt was its own kind of arrogance, that a more powerful blade could end battles faster and spare lives. Others warned that designing a weapon around maximal harm invited a mindset obsessed with killing strokes rather than defense and protection. The Council's response was measured in public and harsher in private. Early catastrophic failures gave them ammunition. There were blades that overloaded on ignition, detonating power cells and maiming their creators. There were blade collapses where the plasma sheath imploded back into the hilt in a lethal feedback arc. One infamous test on a frontier world reportedly carved a molten trench through a transport hangar before the weapon tore itself apart. Official records called these incidents, malfunctions, and training accidents. What followed in the archives was silence. And yet, in meditation chambers and lonely laboratories, the dissatisfaction only deepened. For some, the tranquil hum of a stable blade began to feel insulting in the face of encroaching darkness. They wanted a roar, a scream of power that matched their fear of what was coming. The Order would not sanction that desire, so it went underground where experimenters listened to the stressed whine of overdriven crystals and wondered whether the light side alone could justify such a weapon. In the next chapter, those questions will find champions who no longer ask permission. The 100-year darkness, war, mutation, and weaponized light. Those questions would not wait long for an answer power corrupts. But what happens when that power is poured into a single blade and then unleashed across a century of unending war? The answer is the 100-year darkness, around 7,000 years before the Battle of Yavin. The Jedi Order's unease hardened into open conflict. A faction of dark Jedi broke away, convinced that the Force was meant to be dominated rather than obeyed. They delved into forbidden alchemy, twisting flesh and bone into monstrous war beasts. They bound spirits into armor. They treated living worlds as laboratories. What followed was a prolonged civil war, not just of doctrine, but of nightmares made real. The story of the 100-year darkness is the story of the lightsaber losing its innocence. Before this era, the saber remained an elite dueling sidearm, its hum heard mostly in ritual combat and personal defense. During the darkness, it became a frontline instrument of strategy. Commanders planned assaults around squads of blade bearers. Jedi strike teams carved through siege lines. Dark Jedi shock troops led charges against fortified positions. Sabers cut through blast doors, bypassed shielded choke points, and opened breaches for conventional forces. Entire campaigns were decided by which side could bring more blades to a single corridor at the crucial moment. Despite the horror they inflicted, the Dark Jedi were innovators under battlefield pressure. They began to reshape the weapon itself. Extended blades, driven by modified focusing lenses and altered magnetic field projectors, gave them reach over shield walls and pike formations. Brutal, serrated emitter shrouds forced the plasma to fringe and spark, creating unstable, crackling edges that spat energy on contact and left armor slagged and flesh half-burned. Overcharged power cells dumped far more energy into the beam than was safe, turning sabers into crude anti-armor tools that could punch through heavy plating at the cost of reliability and sometimes the wielder's own safety. Over time, these Dark Jedi stopped viewing the saber as a mere tool and started treating it as a canvas for cruelty. They tuned crystals and emitters to produce harsher, screaming ignition sounds. They favored asymmetrical hilts, hooked guards, and jagged pommels that caught the eye and unsettled the mind. Some bound alchemically altered Kyber into their weapons, coaxing the blade into flickering, sickly hues that suggested corruption even before the first strike terror became a formal tactic. A shrieking, unstable blade igniting in a darkened corridor could rout conscripts before a single blow landed. When the war finally ground to its end at Korbos and the Dark Jedi were cast out, the victors believed the nightmare was contained. Sabers were quietly standardized again. Their most grotesque modifications banned their alchemical secrets, sealed away in restricted vaults. But ideas are harder to imprison than people. For the next 1,000 years, echoes of the 100-year darkness lingered in hidden holocrons, in whispered techniques, in the memory that a lightsaber could be more than elegant, more than honorable. It could be weaponized, light-shaped into fear. And in the next chapter, those buried designs will find a new home among exiles who discover an ancient people on a dead world, and what they found there would change everything. Exile and reinvention. Dark Jedi. Carry the flame. Beyond the Republic, cast out from the Republic, the aftermath of the 100-year darkness did not end with surrender on a single battlefield. It began with a purge of ideas. The defeated Dark Jedi were stripped of rank, their names erased from temple records, their laboratories sealed or burned, their research into crystals and conduits seized by cautious councils that no longer trusted their own around 6,900 years before the Battle of Yavin. The Jedi believed this would contain the threat-confiscated schematics for advanced focusing arrays. Unstable Kyber treatments and experimental power cycling were locked away or destroyed. The Order tried to drag the weapon back toward the light side, toward restraint and control. But what followed was a quieter, more insidious consequence. The most dangerous knowledge did not stay in archives it walked out of. Known space in chains when the Republic chose exile over execution. Transport ships carried these fallen Jedi beyond charted hyperlanes. Each prisoner was a living repository of forbidden techniques. Some had designed early attempts at compact power cells that could free sabers from cumbersome external packs. Others had refined plasma modulation to deliberately destabilize the blade, turning a clean line of energy into a snarling edge that radiated fear. They were forced to surrender physical weapons, yet the patterns remained in their minds for the exiles. This was more than a political defeat. It was the loss of identity. Many had come to see their unstable, aggressive blades as extensions of self. The crackling red or searing orange of bled or tortured crystals mirrored inner turmoil when that was taken away. And they were cast onto barren worlds, at the edge of galactic maps. The psychological wound ran deep power, once expressed through elegant forms of combat, now had nowhere to go except inward into obsession and resentment. Over time, isolation became a forge on desolate moons and forgotten stations. Some exiles scavenged components from mining tools and archaic proto-saber parts, rebuilding weapons in secret. Without Jedi oversight, their sabers drifted further from temple standards. Emitters were overdriven, to the point of distortion containment fields were narrowed, until blades screamed with barely contained plasma. Some experimented with chain dual emitters, precursors to double-bladed designs. Others spliced in unstable power feeds, echoing the old external packs, but tuned for brutal short bursts in combat. In these improvised workshops, the story of the lightsaber took a darker turn. The weapon ceased to be merely a disciplined channel of the Force. It became confession, raw rage and fear, crystallized into humming light. Each misfire, each overload burned scar on metal and flesh, taught them new limits and new ways to break them. This fringe experimentation would shape more than personal arsenals. It laid the groundwork for an entire philosophy of blades bent toward domination and terror. Eventually, these outcasts did not remain alone. Forever, scattered exile routes led toward unclaimed sectors, ancient grave worlds, and forgotten civilizations. And when they finally stood before a red desert planet ruled by a proud warrior species, what they found there would change everything. Not only for the dark side, but for the very idea of what a lightsaber could be. Red Dawn, synthetic crystals, and the birth of the Sith blade. What is a weapon when it no longer reflects its wielder, but bends to their will through pain alone for the early Sith? This was not a philosophical puzzle, but a technological and spiritual challenge. The answer would be written in red on that harsh desert world under a red sun. The exiled Dark Jedi studied both the native Sith species and the buried relics of an older tradition. Over time, they learned that Kyber, the same living crystal the Jedi revered, did not have to be courted or gently attuned through the light side. It could be forced into resonance, dominated through the dark side, and made to sing a different song. The story of the Sith blade begins with this realization. Early Sith alchemists and engineers discovered that Kyber's growth could be replicated and accelerated in furnaces powered by the dark side and industrial reactors where natural crystals took years to form. Synthetic lattices could be grown in weeks, bathed in focused hatred and twisted meditation. The result was not a calm, harmonious gem, but something strained, always on the edge of fracture. From there, an even crueler practice emerged called bleeding. Instead of listening to a crystal, the Sith poured themselves into it. Rage, fear, agony, and unyielding will were driven into every facet until the crystal's natural harmony shattered. What followed was a violent metaphysical, breaking the Kyber's prior attunement to the light side was inverted, and its color deepened into a furious red, as if the stone itself were forever frozen in the moment of a scream. These synthetic and bled crystals produced blades that reflected their birth. They did not hum so much as snarl. The energy output was harsher, more aggressive. Sometimes unstable edges flickered, the cores roared, and unstable sparks spat from the blade during heavy clashes in ancient duels. Some Sith Lords prized weapons that crackled and flared with every strike, seeing that volatility as proof of power and passion made manifest symbolically. The red blade became a deliberate rejection of Jedi subtlety, where Jedi sabers suggested balance and restraint. The Sith weapon announced domination and fear. From across a battlefield, a line of crimson sabers, cutting through smoke and dust, sent a message more potent than any banner. The wielder had embraced the dark side completely and was no longer bound by the old codes. For the next 1,000 years, this visual divide would shape galactic perception of the Force itself. Blue and green came to mean guardianship and defense. Crimson meant conquest and subjugation in crowded spaceports, and on war-torn worlds, observers learned to read that color instantly at a glance, and from a distance, a single ignition could reveal whether the approaching figure was a protector or a conqueror, and future innovations in Sith design would only sharpen that distinction. Forged in chains, Sith, alchemy, hilts, and the aesthetics of terror over time. That single flash of crimson was not enough for the Sith. It was a promise of violence, but not yet a language of fear. In response, Sith artisans turned to their oldest companion, the forbidden sciences of Sith alchemy. If a blade could be corrupted, why not the metal that held it? Why not the hilt itself? In the deep vaults of Korriban and Zeost, and later on, Droman-Kar Sith smiths bathed alloys in ritual circles. They etched runes into molten metal. They channeled the dark side through chained acolytes until the orb screamed. What followed was a new generation of weapons whose hilts were as unnatural as their crystals. These grips did not simply conduct energy. They drank it. The finished metal was unnaturally resilient, resistant to heat and corrosion, and always faintly cold to the touch. Even in desert suns, the story of these hilts was not elegance but domination. Sith design favored mass and menace, where Jedi preferred balanced cylinders. The Sith built brutalist casings with sharp spines and angular guards. Emitter shrouds jutted forward in jagged crowns, giving the illusion that the blade itself was tearing its way into reality. Some double-bladed sabers from the old Sith Empire were capped with hooked vanes that caught the eye in motion, turning each spin into a whirling sigil of aggression form would shape expectation. Any observer who saw such a weapon understood instinctively that mercy was not its purpose. Even dormant, these sabers were meant to unsettle. A deactivated Sith weapon sat heavier in the hand than its size suggested. Its center of gravity pulled toward the pommel, where alchemical nodes and captive crystals distorted the local flow of the Force. Some carried a faint vibration like a distant growl. Others radiated a subtle chill that raised skin and quickened breath. Sensitive or not, most beings felt something wrong in their presence. Was this simple superstition, or the subconscious recognition of the dark side pressing against the edge of perception for the most ambitious Sith? This was not enough. Some Dark Lords bound fragments of defeated foes into their weapons, not merely trophies, but imprisoned echoes. The essence of a fallen Jedi general or rival Sith could be sealed within focusing chambers through blood rites and sacrificial fires. These sabers became portable shrines to victory and suffering when ignited. They whispered half-heard voices, a litany of past battles that fed the wielder's rage and bolstered their sense of power over time. Entire lineages of Sith inherited such relics, adding new bindings after each war, until a single hilt carried centuries of galactic conflict in its metal. In stark contrast, Jedi hilts remained almost austere, smooth lines, minimal ornamentation, and a quiet relationship with the light side. Where the Jedi trusted the Force to speak for itself, the Sith believed terror needed architecture. Every jagged emitter, every heavy grip, and every cold, whispering hilt reinforced their creed. Power displayed was power multiplied, and for the next 1,000 years, the very silhouette of a Sith lightsaber would announce that creed before the blade ever ignited. Empire of Blades, standardization and innovation in the early Sith orders. In the wake of those first brutal designs, the Sith faced a new question. If terror could be carved into metal, could it also be standardized? The answer emerged in the early academies that rose on Korriban Ziost and Dromund Kaas. Their instructors of the dark side reduced the chaos of individual tinkering into repeatable patterns. They drafted baseline schematics for hilts emitter matrices and power cells, so that even the lowest acolyte entered training with a functional lethal blade. Over time, these academies became factories of doctrine and steel. The story of Sith sabercraft shifted from scattered warlords to an organized empire of blades. Apprentices were issued near identical weapons, heavy cylindrical hilts with reinforced grips and simple single emitters. The crystals were synthetic or bled, producing harsh red blades that hummed with a slightly unstable edge. The goal was not elegance. The goal was reliability. Under the most violent conditions of war within the training halls, that reliability fed a very specific philosophy of combat. Where the Jedi emphasized control and defense, the Sith built their forms on aggression, raw offense, and intimidation. Instructors drilled students to hammer through guards, to drive opponents backward, to let the weapon broadcast intent every recommended. Modification pushed in the same direction, extended emitters for longer reach, overcharged focusing lenses for wider impact cones, and throttled power settings that ignored safety margins. Around this time, a second layer began to grow around the standardized core, a culture of personalization that would shape Sith history. For thousands of years, masters encouraged competition between apprentices. Each was expected to alter the issued template to create something more fearsome, more distinctive. Something that would stand out in the arena duels and battlefield reports, a heavier pommel for brutal strikes, a serrated emitter shroud that made the blade appear jagged, a split hilt that could lock together into a staff. These changes were trophies worn in plain sight. What followed was an increasingly sharp divide between the weapons of the masses and the weapons of the elite on the assembly lines of hidden foundries overseen by Sith overseers, rank-and-file troopers, and lesser adepts received near industrial sabers stamped out in batches, tuned just enough to avoid catastrophic failure. In contrast, the higher echelons of the Empire commissioned or forged their own alchemically enhanced masterpieces, hilts, inlaid with dark runes, bound with living metal, or fused to talismans that fed on fear and pain. The most ambitious began to experiment with entirely new forms, double-bladed sabers for corridor slaughter, crossguard emitters that turned parries into maiming cuts, unstable blades that screamed with barely contained energy. Each innovation was both weapon and declaration, a promise that its wielder intended not only to win, but to dominate. And in this furnace of standardization and ruthless creativity, the next generation of Sith would discover something even stranger, new lightsaber forms that were not merely deadly, but almost unnatural. Some elegant, some monstrous, and one in particular that should never have worked at all. Two edges of darkness. The first, double-bladed lightsabers. What happens when a weapon built on precision and restraint is twisted into something that should not function at all? The answer is the double-bladed lightsaber, a design that turned the disciplined art of dueling into a whirling storm of plasma and risk. In the deep laboratories of the early Sith Empire engineers and alchemists confronted a problem that seemed almost absurd. How could two blades emerge from a single hilt without tearing themselves apart through interference? The solution demanded more than metal and circuitry. It required a shared power core tuned through paired crystals held in exact resonance. If the alignment drifted even slightly, the energy fields could collapse into each other in a flash of runaway plasma around the height of the ancient Sith empires. This challenge became an obsession for those who wished to outmatch the Jedi in close quarters. Conflict, standard emitters were lengthened and mirrored, power regulators were overbuilt and then stripped down again, and exotic focusing lenses were carved through dark side rituals. What followed was a series of catastrophic failures, hilts that detonated on ignition blades that sheared sideways or guttered out under stress. Each disaster claimed limbs and lives, but also yielded data over time. A stable configuration emerged, two emitters sharing a central power channel and a carefully staggered modulation cycle that kept the magnetic containment fields from colliding. The result was not elegant in the Jedi sense. It was brutal, a weapon that could project a continuous wall of energy in tight corridors or tear through enemy lines with spinning arcs of red light for the Sith. This was enough. The story of its adoption begins with doctrine. The Sith favored overwhelming offense pressing an enemy until defense simply collapsed. A single blade could threaten a line. A double-bladed saber could dominate a space in 3 dimensions. Its wielder could attack high and low, front and rear with a single pivot in the cramped halls of warships and temples. This turned duels into executions, but the design demanded a new way of fighting. Continuous motion was no longer a flourish. It was survival. The wielder had to keep the staff turning, redirecting momentum so that each strike flowed into the next. Spinning parries replaced static blocks. Footwork became circular and predatory. To hesitate was to risk one blade crossing into the other, or worse, crossing into the wielder's own flesh. Mastery meant accepting that every misstep carried the promise of self-inflicted ruin, a truth that mirrored the Sith embrace of the dark side itself, as these weapons proved themselves in battle. They became marks of distinction within the Empire, not standard-issue tools, but symbols that a warrior had the discipline and ruthlessness to dance so close to destruction. Some Dark Lords reserved them for their personal guards. Others claimed them as signatures, turning duels into performances meant to inspire terror as much as victory long. Before a single Zabrak assassin ignited such a weapon, before the fall of any republic on galactic holofeeds, their roots lay in shadowed training halls on Korriban and Droman Kars. Their apprentices drilled until their muscles remembered what their minds still feared. They learned to spin and strike with death, burning from both ends of the hilt, and that lesson would shape every infamous duel that followed in the centuries to come. Other unnatural variants would appear. Twisted crossguards, unstable blades, and sabers that bent their own rules. Each new form pushed the boundary between control and chaos, a boundary the Sith were always willing to cross. Crossguards, chains and whips, experimental Sith, saber forms in the shadowed foundries of the Sith empires. The hunger for new power did not stop with longer blades or double-ended hilts. It turned inward toward the very shape of the weapon itself. If a lightsaber was an extension of the will, then what happened when that will demanded? Teeth hooks and snares. The answer was a wave of experimental forms that blurred the line between sword and torture device around the late Old Republic era. Sith artisans began carving channels into their emitters, small side vents and secondary emitters that spat narrow tongues of plasma across the hilt. These early crossguards were not yet the wild, unstable flares seen millennia later, but careful, controlled projections meant to catch and bind enemy blades in the chaos of a duel. They protected the hand-turned parries into traps and taught Sith duelists to think in 3 directions at once. Over time, this idea of guarding and weaponizing the hilt itself would shape more infamous crossguard sabers in later ages. What followed was stranger still. Some Sith rejected the rigid blade entirely and pursued movement as a weapon they forged. Chain sabers, segmented emitters linked along articulated spines, each segment wrapped in a continuous sheath of energy. Others wove light whips, thin, flexible. Plasma streams held together by exotic focusing matrices. These weapons required extreme control. A single misjudged sweep could carve through the wielder as easily as a foe. Yet for sadistic duelists and interrogators, that was the point. A light whip could coil around limbs, sear flesh without killing, and turn a battlefield into a slow circling hunt. Not every innovation was so theatrical. In hidden laboratories, Sith engineers experimented with variable length blades tuned to expand or contract with a twist of the grip. A saber might begin at dagger length, then snap outward into a full greatsaber. In a heartbeat, some hilts concealed switchable emitters, rotating rings that could shift the direction of the blade mid-combat. Others hid secondary blades in pommels or along the side of the hilt, dormant until a concealed trigger spat a sudden spike of plasma into an opponent's guard. The story of these weapons was one of ambush and misdirection, turning every close approach into a potential death sentence. But the dark side is not forgiving, and the failure rate of these designs was catastrophic. Overloaded power cells detonated in the wielder's hand, unstable focusing arrays spat arcs of plasma in random directions. Chain sabers twisted out of alignment and tore themselves apart mid-swing. Many of these prototypes were as dangerous to their users as to their enemies. Some never left the testing chambers. Others claimed their creators on the training floor and vanished from galactic history as cursed curiosities. Yet the ideas behind them did not vanish, even when specific forms fell out of use. The lessons remained. Surprise, intimidation, and cultivated unpredictability became permanent threats in Sith saber philosophy for thousands of years. Later Sith Lords would still favor blades that screamed with unstable energy hilts that hid secondary emitters or designs meant to terrify at first ignition, and in the next era of the war between dark side and light side, those concepts would reappear, refined on new battlefields where the shape of a single blade could shift the course of a duel. The Darksaber, a singular blade against a galaxy of light. On most battlefields, the clash between Jedi and Sith was a storm of familiar colors: blue, green, red, and the occasional amethyst flare. Yet among all these blades, there existed one weapon that refused to blend into the spectrum, a single line of darkness framed in light. This was the Darksaber. Its story begins more than a millennium before the films with Tara Vizsla, the first Mandalorian ever inducted into the Jedi Order, in an era when Mandalorians and Jedi met most often through war. Tara stood at a crossroads between warrior creed and monastic discipline. What followed was the forging of a blade that reflected that tension rather than the rounded, luminous column of a standard lightsaber. The Darksaber's plasma was compressed into a flat, angular profile, a black core that seemed to drink in the light around it, edged in a sharp, white corona in motion. The Darksaber did not simply glow. It consumed the space it passed through. Witnesses reported that rooms appeared dimmer when it ignited, as if the blade pulled illumination and attention into itself. Its hum was lower, more insistent, less the clean chime of a Jedi weapon and more a focused growl. And in combat, it behaved with an unusual sense of weight, where most sabers felt nearly massless, guided primarily by the Force. This one resisted. The hand demanded strength and intent. Each swing carried momentum that a duelist could feel in bone and muscle. During Tara Vizsla's lifetime, the Darksaber served as both Jedi tool and Mandalorian symbol. A paradox given form. When he died, the weapon did not remain in the Jedi Temple, quietly archived. Instead, Mandalorians of House Vizsla reclaimed it during a later conflict, stealing it from the heart of Jedi power. What they found there would change everything, because from that moment the blade ceased to be merely a relic, it became a claim over time. Mandalorian custom hardened around it. Leadership of Mandalore was not granted by council or bloodline alone, but proven through possession of the Darksaber, and possession was almost never peaceful. The story of the Darksaber is written in duels aboard burning warships, in throne rooms, shattered by explosives in the dust of sieges and civil wars. It passed from one ruler to another, not through ceremony, but through combat, each victory adding another layer of legend to the already ancient weapon for Jedi and Sith. This single blade posed an uncomfortable question if the Force and the lightsaber were their sacred domains. What did it mean that an entire warrior culture had elevated one of these weapons into a symbol that rejected both the light side's restraint and the dark side's tyranny? The Darksaber stood for Mandalorian defiance, a statement that power could be claimed without kneeling to temple or empire. For thousands of years, the Darksaber would disappear into vaults and battlefields, only to resurface again in new hands. Every reappearance reminded the galaxy that not all legendary blades belonged to Jedi or Sith, and in the next age of conflict, when empires rose and fell around it, the Darksaber would once again ignite in the shadows, pointing toward an even stranger evolution of the lightsaber's form. Temples of steel and stone. Lightsaber training in Jedi and Sith societies. For thousands of years, the Darksaber's harsh, flat hum echoed through training chambers and throne rooms. But it was only one voice in a much larger chorus. The galaxy's true soundtrack was the steady, layered murmur of countless lightsabers igniting and fading in temples of steel and stone across every era. The story of the lightsaber is not only about battles, it is also about the quiet, repetitive discipline that made those battles possible. In Jedi enclaves, from Coruscant to distant frontier outposts, training halls opened into wide, airy spaces, polished. Floors reflected pale skylight or gentle glow panels, turning each room into a pool of muted color. The walls were plain, broken only by racks of simple practice sabers and hovering clusters of training remotes. These sabers were designed to sting, not maim. Their blades delivered sharp, corrective pain that encouraged precision over aggression. What followed was a daily ritual that began before dawn every morning. Rows of Jedi younglings and Padawans moved through katas in unison, blades humming at low power. Settings forms were practiced again and again, each sequence a moving meditation on the light side, and control instructors walked the lines, adjusting stances with calm hands, their own sabers usually inactive. The only sounds were controlled breathing, the soft whir of remotes firing harmless bolts, and the ever-present hum of contained plasma over time. That sound became a mechanical chant accompanying study, reflection, and quiet conversations about the Force Sith facilities told a different story. If Jedi halls resembled dojos, Sith arenas resembled pits and coliseums deep within fortresses on Korriban, Droman Khas, or later under Imperial citadels. Training chambers were shadowed, and enclosed stone or durasteel walls rose high and close, trapping the echoes of clashing blades. The floors were scarred and darkened by burns, stained by older conflicts there. Practice sabers were rare. Sith acolytes fought with live weapons from the beginning, their red or unstable blades turning every session into a potential execution. Morning exercises were not gentle katas, but brutal sparring rotations, overseen by masters who rewarded victory and punished hesitation. Failure meant real injury, and sometimes death trial by combat was not ceremony. It was curriculum architecture, reinforced this ethic. Galleries ringed the pits, so rivals and superiors could watch, judge, and remember any display of weakness. The chambers themselves were arenas of fear and competition, designed to amplify the dark side. Yet in both orders, the constant was sound in Jedi temples, the layered hum of blades blended with distant chanting and soft footfalls in Sith strongholds. It merged with shouted oaths and the crack of bodies hitting the floor. In either case, the weapon's voice seeped into daily life. It accompanied meditation in the Jedi Order and ambition in the Sith Empire. What happens when a single sound shapes generations of warriors from childhood? That answer would shape everything that came next, as these training halls produced the duelists whose clashes would define galactic history. Cities of sabers, how galactic wars drove mass production as those duelists stepped out of the training halls and onto true battlefields. Another transformation began. Power was no longer expressed, blade against blade in quiet courtyards, but in burning skies and shattered cities. The hum of a single saber became a chorus around the time of the Great Hyperspace War. The galactic balance shifted overnight. Ancient Sith realms collided with the Republic, and both Sith and Jedi found their numbers swelling as entire generations were raised in the shadow of war. This was the story of a weapon force to keep pace with mass mobilization as Force users multiplied on every front. The early Protosaber had already proven that a handheld plasma blade was possible, but it was clumsy, tethered to external power packs by thick cables in a drawn-out piece. Such a temperamental tool might have remained rare in an age of total conflict. Commanders demanded something else. They needed thousands of reliable sabers in the hands of knights, acolytes, and soldiers. The result was the first semi-industrial forges in fortress worlds of the Sith Empire and hidden Jedi enclaves across the Republic. Great workshops roared to life. Standardized emitter matrices were machined in repeating patterns, hilt chassis, rolled off assembly lines in stacked racks of durasteel and alloy centralized Kyber allocation. Councils catalogued crystals by size, resonance, and alignment, then shipped them in armored convoys to academies and fronts. What followed was a quiet bureaucratization of the most mystical weapon in galactic history. Over time, this efficiency came with a cost. Individuality faded. Many Jedi in the Old Republic marched with near-identical cylindrical hilts hanging from identical belts, Sith legions carried ranks of red blades built from the same synthetic Kyber vats and the same brutalist designs, yet at the highest levels, the old traditions clung to life. Dark Lords commissioned alchemically reinforced masterpieces, double-bladed sabers meant for whirling carnage. Jedi weapon masters carved subtle inlays into hilts tuned to a single practitioner's stance and breathing. The practical challenges were immense: distant fronts in frozen tundras, corrosive swamps, and void-scarred space stations strained even these new systems' emitters, clogged with ice or ash. Kyber fell out of harmonic alignment. Under constant stress, field technicians became as vital as generals repairing cracked focusing lenses under fire, rerouting power cells on troop carriers, and salvaging components from shattered hilts amid smoking craters. In some sieges, entire squads were tasked only with guarding Kyber shipments, whose loss could cripple a campaign as sabers flooded the battlefield. Their aura of rarity diminished, and a new arms race began. Mandalorian smiths experimented with Beskar shields and blades designed to catch and trap. The energy beam engineers refined slug throwers and mass drivers that hurled projectiles too fast to deflect Sith artificers pushed in the opposite direction, forging unstable, screaming blades and experimental crossguards meant to overwhelm defenses. For the next 1,000 years, every new countermeasure inspired a more terrifying refinement of the lightsaber itself, and somewhere in those forges, designers were already imagining weapons that could end even a master's blade with a single strike, shields, slugs, and cortosis. The galaxy learns to answer the lightsaber, but the moment a weapon seems unbeatable, the galaxy begins to look for cracks in its armor. Power invites resistance, and the lightsaber was no exception. Over time, entire cultures reshaped their technology and tactics around one uncomfortable truth. In close quarters, a Jedi or Sith with a blade held every advantage. The first answer was not a new kind of energy, but stubborn matter. Cortosis, a rare fibrous ore discovered in scattered veins across the outer rim, did not merely resist a lightsaber. It reacted to it when a blade struck pure cortosis. The energy field shorted, and the weapon shut down for a precious heartbeat. What followed was a quiet panic in certain Jedi war councils. Suddenly, a single, well-placed parry could turn a duel into a desperate scramble to reignite a dead hilt. Other alloys followed Frick, forged into elegant staves and armor that could endure repeated strikes without melting. And Beskar, the pride of Mandalorian smiths, whose plates could drink in a saber's heat and hold firm. These materials did not end the age of the lightsaber, but they forced a change in rhythm. Duels against cortosis, wielding assassins or Beskar-clad commandos became contests of patience, footwork, and precision, rather than simple tests of whose blade touched first. Around the same eras, military engineers turned to energy itself. If a blade could turn aside blaster bolts, then perhaps a tuned barrier could turn aside the blade. Personal shields, once designed to diffuse shrapnel and stray fire, were recalibrated to flare against coherent plasma fields. In some wars, shock troops advanced behind shimmering ovals of energy that spat sparks when struck by sabers, buying seconds for comrades to retreat or encircle the attacker. The story of close-quarters combat shifted from single heroic charges to carefully layered defenses. Not every answer was elegant. Some commanders abandoned the fantasy of dueling a Jedi at all. Instead, they trusted in mass and chaos. Slug throwers, firing solid projectiles that could tumble change course or shatter on impact, challenged even the most disciplined deflection forms. Explosives, mines, and saturating artillery barrages turned battlefields into storms of debris. A lightsaber could not catch every fragment, and for thousands of years, doctrine manuals quietly reminded officers that overwhelming fire remained the most reliable cure for a lone force wielder. These counters did not diminish the mystique of the blade. They refined it. Jedi and Sith responded by drilling deeper into form and motion, tight economical parries against slugs, predictive footwork to stand where shrapnel was not yet saber, throws that curved through shield gaps or struck generators directly. What they found there would change everything. Each new defense forced the orders to explore the Force in more creative ways. In this arms race, the lightsaber was never truly supreme. It was central, a fulcrum around which armor alloys, shield harmonics, and battlefield tactics revolved. And as the galaxy pushed back against the blade, designers in hidden workshops began to imagine something more radical than hardened metal or brighter shields, a weapon that could answer the lightsaber, not by enduring it, but by unmaking it at the source. The High Republic glow. Elegance, variety, and a golden age of design in the centuries that followed that search for a weapon to unmake the lightsaber. Something very different happened instead of escalation. The galaxy entered an age of relative calm. The High Republic. This was not peace, in the absolute sense. There were still pirates, marauders, and the dark side lurking at the edges, but there was no all-consuming galactic war. And without that constant pressure of extinction, the Jedi turned their attention inward to refinement rather than survival. Around 200 years before the Battle of Yavin, the Jedi Order stood at the height of its confidence. The Republic expanded toward the Outer Rim on gleaming starlight beacons, and the Jedi went with it as explorers, mediators, and symbols of hope. In this context, the lightsaber became more than a battlefield instrument. It became a calling card, a work of art that expressed the Jedi's role in a hopeful empire of law and compromise, rather than endless conflict. What followed was a flourishing of design that earlier war-torn eras could never have sustained. Hilts varied wildly from temple to temple and sector to sector. Some Jedi carried crossguard emitters, not brutal and jagged as the later Sith would favor, but clean and balanced, intended to protect the wielder's hands. During elaborate forms, others commissioned emitters tuned for shipboard use, shorter blades with precise containment fields, so a single misstep would not breach a hull and doom an entire crew to vacuum. Over time, regional cultures left their mark on the weapon. The story of a Jedi service could be read in the metal of the hilt. Some were wrapped in Rosha wood from Kashyyyk, others bore inlaid glyphs from Mirialan artisans or Lothalian filigree. Polished alloys shone openly instead of being hidden beneath scorched grips. The craftsmanship was meant to be seen to reassure civilians that this was a disciplined tool of the light side, not an instrument of terror. Mounted combat pushed innovation even further on the frontiers. Jedi rode swift vector speeders and other mounts into atmospheric engagements. Their sabers followed suit. Some hilts locked directly into speeder frames, forming semi-fixed lances, stabilized by cross-guarded projections that kept the blade steady at high speed. Others were balanced for one-handed use with elongated pommels and reinforced emitters to handle the strain of sweeping passes against raiders and rogue war droids. There was even a subtle pattern interrupt in how the Order thought about presence for thousands of years. The sight of a humming blade had been a warning in this High Republic. It became a promise. Blades tended toward brighter hues, clear blues and greens shining from immaculate emitters. The hilts bore the crest of the Jedi Order and the Republic's sunburst side by side. The message was simple. The Jedi were here. The galaxy was safe. Yet beneath that golden glow, the seeds of tragedy were already taking root. Confidence shaded into complacency. Borders pushed farther than wisdom might advise. And the elegant variety of the era hid a dangerous assumption that this balance would last forever. When the shadows finally returned, the contrast with this radiant optimism would shape how the fall of the Jedi was felt across the galaxy and how their weapons would be remembered. Falling stars, lost techniques, and the fragmentation of saber lore. That confidence hid a quieter truth. Power fades not only in battle but in memory. Over time, even the brightest techniques of the light side and the darkest inventions of the Sith can be swallowed by silence. A weapon that once defined an age becomes a rumor, a footnote, a relic in a locked display case. Throughout galactic history, the lightsaber's evolution was not a smooth ascent, but a jagged line of discovery and loss. Every great cataclysm shattered more than armies. When temples burned and archives fell, entire chains of technical knowledge snapped at once. When the Jedi Temple on Ossus was devastated, and later, when Coruscant's great halls were sacked, what followed was the erasure of whole families of exotic emitter designs, crossguard variants, and rare dueling forms whose only remaining traces were half-scorched schematics. During the Great Sith Purges, The pattern repeated on the other side of the conflict-hidden academies, on worlds such as Malachor Korriban and Zeost, did not only store holocrons of dark side philosophy, they held precise instructions for unstable blades, alchemically reinforced hilts, and experimental dual-phase constructs when those fortresses collapsed under Jedi assault, when entire orders of Sith were annihilated in a single campaign. The last living practitioners of those arts fell with them, and with their deaths, certain construction rituals simply ended. Some of these losses were almost mundane in their final moments. A single artisan who knew how to temper Kyber in the magnetic storms of Vijun, a reclusive master who could bind a Protosaber's external power pack into a compact internal cell, a small monastery that understood how to coax a crystal into shifting between blade lengths at a thought. When those individuals vanished in war, or in later inquisitions, the story of their craft ended on the same battlefield. Yet not every absence came from fire and slaughter. Some techniques were buried deliberately as the Jedi recovered from earlier eras of near extinction. High councils reviewed the most dangerous saber customs and made quiet decisions to let them die out certain spinning emitter assemblies that could shear through armor, but frequently maimed their users. Certain dual-bladed training regimens that had produced more martyrs than masters were quietly removed from curricula. The Sith, in their own way, did the same after rituals that destabilized entire strongholds or blades that consumed their wielders. Some Dark Lords ordered their records sealed or destroyed to prevent rivals from repeating those disasters by the late Republic. This long erosion had done its work to many Jedi ancient saber types had become legends rather than practical options. Tales of cable-bound Protosabers, of crackling, unstable crimson blades, or of the first Darksaber were treated as curiosities in dusty archives, not as tools for present conflicts, and yet fragments endured, scattered in forgotten vaults on remote battlefields and in half-corrupted holocrons. For the next 1,000 years, isolated seekers would begin to uncover pieces of this lost lore, often without guidance, and the consequences of those rediscoveries would shape what came after. The Clone Wars. Standard issue. Elegance and battlefield adaptation. As those scattered fragments of ancient designs lingered in obscurity, the galaxy marched toward a different kind of conflict. Not a duel between isolated mystics, but an industrialized war that would engulf entire sectors. The question was simple. How would a weapon born in monasteries and forgotten empires survive assembly line slaughter? The answer was the Clone Wars. By the time of that galactic conflict, most Jedi carried hilts that seemed almost understated. Simple cylinders of metal with clean lines and minimal ornamentation. This was not an age of Baroque crossguards or exposed power cells. It was an age of standard-issue elegance. The story of the Clone Wars lightsaber was the story of reliability, a hilt that could be machined, repaired, and reassembled on a troop transport between hyperspace jumps, and then drawn again on the next shattered world on campaign. A lightsaber became less a duelist's flourish and more a field tool. Jedi. Generals stood at the front of advancing clone legions, turning walls of blaster fire into shimmering halos of light-side energy blades that once clashed against Sith warlords, now carved through blast doors, bulkheads, and armored hull plating. A single stroke could breach a fortress gate or silence a heavy cannon position in the chaos of battle. That same blade became a signal beacon raised high to rally scattered troops or to mark an extraction point through smoke and dust. What followed was a constant grinding strain on both Jedi and weapon. These hilts were dragged through mud on Umbara, choked with Geonosian dust, and showered in shrapnel, on worlds the archives had never catalogued over time. The polished chrome of temple-forged emitters dulled under carbon scoring grips were re-wrapped with ration cloth or leather scavenged from downed pilots. Power cells were swapped with improvised components pulled from wrecked droids far from the serene forges of Coruscant Jedi learned to strip and tune, their sabers in field tents under artillery fire. The pace of the war left little room for experimentation. There was no luxury for elaborate new designs or risky prototypes. Commanders needed a weapon that would ignite every time, even after years of continuous deployment, so proven configurations dominated straight hilts, balanced for one- or two-handed use with internal layouts that any temple-trained initiate could service. This quiet uniformity would shape the visual language of the era. rows of nearly identical hilts hanging from the belts of generals' Padawans, and even undercover operatives embedded deep in separatist space. And yet, beneath that surface sameness, older traditions still flickered at the margins. Some Jedi carried curved hilts optimized for Makashi. Dueling forms a refined echo of aristocratic fencing from an earlier age. Others wielded double-bladed sabers or paired Shoto offhand weapons, legacies of more aggressive philosophies that predated the modern order. These outliers hinted at forgotten schools and half-buried lineages, preserved through master to apprentice. Even as the Republic crumbled around them, the war was forcing the Jedi to fight as soldiers, but their blades still carried older memories, and the next phase of the conflict would drag those memories into the open, in a way no one in the temple was prepared for. Order 66, and after, extinction, secrecy, and buried hilts. In the final months of the Clone War, the hum of lightsabers had become background noise to the galaxy, a constant presence on 1,000 battlefields. Then, in a single, coordinated breath, that sound stopped. Power did not fade gently. It was cut down on Command Order 66, turned an ancient symbol of the light side into a target. The Jedi were spread thin across the galactic front, their blades ignited in service to a republic already claimed by the dark side. With one transmission, allies became executioners. What followed was a silence more shocking than any bombardment. Thousands of sabers went out almost at once. Some dropped still burning beside fallen Jedi. Others were seized as trophies by clone commanders and ambitious officers. A weapon that had defined Jedi presence for thousands of years vanished from public view in a matter of hours. In the days that followed, the survivors understood that their own weapons had become beacons. The Empire was listening for any trace of the old order. Many Jedi responded with an act that would have seemed unthinkable. Only weeks before they abandoned or destroyed their sabers, some buried hilts beneath the soil of nameless moons. Others sealed them in forgotten temples or collapsed ruins. There were stories of Jedi disassembling their blades, scattering emitters, power cells, and Kyber crystals across entire systems, so no single discovery could betray them. Over time, the act of carrying a lightsaber became an open admission of treason. The new Empire recognized the danger and the opportunity in these relics. Imperial intelligence and later, the Inquisitorius were ordered to collect every captured hilt laboratories on worlds such as Coruscant and Arcanis, studied their focusing arrays, containment fields, and Kyber harmonics, not out of respect for the Jedi, but to strip their legacy for parts. Some sabers were destroyed in public displays to prove the end of the Order. Others were quietly dismantled to refine blaster technology, starfighter weapons, and containment systems. The dark side did not waste useful power for ordinary citizens. This transformation was profound before the Purge. Holonews footage of Jedi in war armor had made sabers familiar. Now years could pass without a single glimpse of that distinctive glow. Propaganda recast the weapon as the mark of traitors and sorcerers. So when a blade did appear, reactions were immediate awe from those who still remembered, reverence, fear in those raised on imperial doctrine, and often instant violence from local garrisons, conditioned to shoot first. How could a single shaft of light inspire such extremes? The answer was that it had become a myth made real. Yet even as Jedi hilts were being hidden or ground to scrap, the story of the lightsaber was not ending in secret foundries, and Sith sanctums. The dark side was reshaping the form for a new breed of hunter Imperial Inquisitors, and their spinning crimson rings were only the beginning, and the next phase of this history would shape how the galaxy understood the very sight of a blade. Inquisitorium steel, Imperial sabers, and the mechanization of fear. In the shadow of the newly risen Empire, fear itself became a weapon. But what happens when that fear is given machinery and a crimson edge? The answer is the Inquisitorius and the engineered terror of their sabers, formed from fallen Jedi and hand-picked dark side adepts. The Imperial Inquisitors were not Sith in title, yet they served Sith power directly. Their task was simple: and merciless hunt the surviving Jedi, extinguish any spark of light side resistance, and ensure that no new threats to the Emperor would rise. What followed was a quiet war in alleys, hangars, and forgotten temples, a war fought with weapons designed as much for spectacle as for combat. Their hilts announced that change immediately. Instead of the simple cylinders of the old order, The Inquisitors carried broad-ringed assemblies, double-bladed and mechanically complex. A central grip extended into 2 emitters, while a circular frame encased the hilt. This ring could rotate at high speed, driven by internal motors and gyros when both blades were ignited and the mechanism engaged. The result was a whirling disc of red energy, a spinning halo of the dark side that could fill a corridor with lethal light. In practice, this design served several Imperial priorities at once. The spinning function allowed even a moderately trained adept to project an overwhelming offense. The blades became a moving barrier capable of batting aside blaster fire from entire squads while driving back a single Jedi through sheer pressure. To untrained eyes on some occupied world, the sight of an Inquisitor descending from a shuttle, their saber shrieking in a circular blur, turned resistance into panic before the first strike over time. This mechanization of fear shaped their fighting style. The ringed sabers encouraged broad sweeping motions and aggressive rushes. The weapon did part of the work, compensating for the fact that many Inquisitors lacked the refined dueling forms of the old Temple Masters. Yet this power came with trade-offs. The more machinery wrapped around the Kyber, the more points of failure. They were damaged. Bearings, seized motors, or misaligned emitters could turn that spinning advantage into a deadly liability. A single well-placed strike from a calm defender could jam the ring, and suddenly the intricate terror weapon became an awkward staff. These sabers also revealed how far the Empire had moved from the intimate traditions of earlier eras for thousands of years. A lightsaber hilt had been a personal testament, each component chosen through meditation, each crystal bonded through the Force. The Inquisitorium's armory broke. That lineage, hilts were standardized, manufactured in batches, and issued replacements could be slotted in with minimal adjustment. The story of sabercraft here was not one of pilgrimage, but of inventory. In that sense, Inquisitor blades were a dark mirror of mass production. The Empire did not need each hunter to forge a masterpiece. It needed a symbol that could be replicated across the galactic frontier, a ring of red that promised the same consequence on Lothal as on Coruscant. Yet even this frightening innovation was only a step. The next designs would abandon rings entirely and twist the very stability of the blade itself, turning the lightsaber into something unstable, volatile, and far more unpredictable. Vader's furnace, a life support, saber, and the weight of history. To twist the stability of the blade was to twist the expectations of combat. But there was one figure for whom instability took on a different meaning. Not a crackling edge, but a broken body, bound in metal. The story of Darth Vader's lightsaber is the story of a weapon rebuilt around ruin and turned into a furnace that kept a fallen Jedi moving through the dark. In the aftermath of Mustafar, when Anakin Skywalker's body was remade on Coruscant, his elegant Jedi saber was lost. The weapon that replaced it did not begin as a clean break. Instead, it was an evolution, heavier, denser, an echo of the Jedi hilt he once carried, but rebuilt with industrial components and a wider grip to fit armored gloves and mechanical fingers. What followed was a design that looked almost standard at a glance, yet felt brutally utilitarian. In the hand, Vader's ruined lungs and scorched nerves meant that the acrobatics of his youth were gone. Every movement in his life support armor cost effort, so the saber's balance shifted to match its weight, drew toward the emitter, and the V. Thickened pommel trading. Rapid flourishes for momentum and follow-through in combat. This produced a style of powerful, deliberate strikes, each swing a commitment rather than a feint. Instead of the darting exchanges of the Clone Wars duels, the Empire's enforcer advanced step by measured step blade, raised in an implacable arc that physical reality carried symbolic power. The hilt still faintly recalled. Jedi designed the same basic silhouette, the same functional controls, but from it emerged a red blade born of a bled crystal. The image itself was a contradiction, a Jedi's outline filled with Sith intent. It was a constant reminder of what had been twisted and lost, the light side training that shaped his form, now channeling the dark side with every strike. Over time, the presence of that weapon became inseparable from the sound of his respirator corridors. On rebel ships fell silent when the ignition, snap hiss, cut through the mechanical breathing. The combination created an atmosphere of utter inevitability and dread, the sense that the conflict was already decided before the first blow. How could an ordinary soldier stand against a walking machine whose very life support was synchronized to the hum of a crimson blade? In Vader's hands, the lightsaber ceased to be a duelist's instrument and became an executioner's tool. It ended Jedi survivors in hidden temples, cut down officers who failed the Empire, and severed the last threads of the Old Order's hope. Each death added invisible weight to the hilt, so that by the time of Hoth and Bespin, every activation carried the history of a purge. For thousands of years, lightsabers had been symbols of guardianship. This one had become a moving death sentence. And yet even this furnace of hatred would shape the next generation of blades in a way no Sith master intended. A new hope, an old blade. Luke, Obi-Wan, and the return of the saber. And yet even this furnace of hatred would shape the next generation of blades in a way no Sith master intended. In the quiet that followed, another weapon waited in a desert hut, a relic from a different age, when the light side still walked openly through the galactic core. This was not a trophy of slaughter, but an heirloom of a fallen knight in that small room on Tatooine. Obi-Wan Kenobi opened an old chest and revealed Anakin Skywalker's lightsaber. The gesture appeared simple, a mentor handing a tool to a farm boy, but beneath it lay the weight of an almost extinguished tradition. The story of the Jedi for thousands of years converged on that moment, a single hilt bridging the gap between forgotten knightly orders and a young man who had never even seen the Force at work for the Empire. This blade was contraband for the Jedi. It was lineage for Luke. It was a mystery. When Obi-Wan said it was his father's weapon, he was not merely returning property. He was quietly passing a torch that had nearly gone out the long chain of masters and apprentices that once spanned millennia had been broken. This was a fragile attempt to splice one last link back into place in the age of the Empire. A blue blade in motion was no longer a common sight of guardianship. It was an anomaly in a galaxy conditioned to fear anything that resembled the Old Order. When Obi-Wan ignited Anakin's saber in the Mos Eisley Cantina, what followed was more than a barroom scuffle. That flash of light cut through not just alien thugs, but nearly 2 decades of Imperial propaganda. Every patron who saw it witnessed a ghost from the Clone Wars, an echo of campaigns and duels they had been told were treason. The same was true aboard the Death Star. A single blue line against endless grey corridors carried the memory of temple halls and council chambers, now reduced to ash. The duel between Obi-Wan and Vader looked sparse, even hesitant, compared to the acrobatic forms of the Old Republic. But that was the point. The elaborate sequences, drilled into Jedi and Sith on battlefields of ancient war, had been lost to purges, exile, age, and secrecy. Luke's early training reflected this amnesia. His swings against a remote on the Falcon were clumsy, his stance uncertain. The weapon in his hands had once been refined through codified forms and temple katas. Now it was a half-remembered art, passed down by a tired survivor, improvising from memory. The galaxy itself had forgotten how to see lightsabers as symbols of balance. They had become either museum pieces or instruments of terror over time. As Luke's understanding of the Force deepened, the meaning of that blade began to shift again, from relic to responsibility, from threat to promise. And as stories of a new Jedi spread through rebel cells and Imperial remnants, a faint memory stirred across the stars, a sense that these weapons had once stood for something more than fear, and that they could one day do so again. Kylo's crossguard, unstable power, and the echo of ancient experiments. In that faint memory of promise, another blade ignited in the dark, not smooth, not serene, but ragged, a weapon that seemed to scream with every movement where Jedi sabers once hummed with restrained power. Kylo Ren's lightsaber tore at the air, its crimson blade a storm of unstable energy. The sound was not a steady thrum, but a crackling roar punctuated by snarls of venting plasma. Visually, the weapon seemed unfinished. The central blade broke the darkness in violent pulses, while 2 smaller beams jutted from the hilt, forming a crossguard of raw light side vents where energy spat and flared each time the saber moved. These were not ornamental flourishes. They were scars in the weapon's design, evidence that something deep within the hilt strained against containment. The story of Kylo's crossguard begins with the crystal at its heart, a bled Kyber forced into submission until it cracked under the pressure. Sith for thousands of years had experimented with such violations of the light side. They forged synthetic crystals. They fractured natural ones they twisted. Resonance with the dark side to gain more power at the cost of stability. What followed was a lineage of unstable blades that burned hotter, struck harder, and threatened to consume their wielders. Ancient Sith engineers in the old empires learned that a damaged or overcharged crystal needed somewhere to vent excess energy. Early, crossguard concepts appeared in forgotten arsenals, not as elegant medieval flourishes, but as functional exhaust ports, small lateral emitters that bled off dangerous surges to keep the main blade from tearing itself apart. Kylo's saber echoes, those prototypes, the side blades form a brutal handguard, yet their primary purpose is survival. Without them, the cracked crystal might overload catastrophically. Over time, such designs vanished as both Jedi and Sith refined their craft. Standard emitters, precise, focusing lenses, and carefully attuned Kyber produced the familiar, clean blades of the Clone Wars and the Galactic Civil War. In that age, a crossguard was unnecessary, even primitive. The Empire's Inquisitors and surviving Sith favored spinning rings and double blades, not wild experimental vents. Kylo Ren's choice therefore stands out in galactic history, in an era where lightsabers have become rare and half-remembered. His feral weapon feels ancient, a deliberate rejection of Jedi refinement and of the controlled red blades of Sidious and Vader. The volatility of the saber mirrors, Kylo's fractured psyche, each unstable flicker, an externalization of inner conflict. The blade shudders because its master does, whether through recovered schematics, Sith holocrons, or instinctive trial. Kylo revived dangerous archaic practices, long thought buried in ruined temples and lost warfare. What they found there would change everything for them, turning a symbol of balance into an instrument of barely contained rage. And yet, this was not the only echo of ancient experimentation to return in this era. Another relic of forgotten design waited in the shadows, its edge far older and its story far stranger, reforged and remembered. Rey reconstructed sabers and reclaimed lore in the shadow of those ancient experiments. Another story unfolded, not in forgotten temples, but in the ruins of a fallen empire. At the end of the Galactic Civil War, the elegant weapon of the Jedi had become a relic, a rumor, yet one scavenger on Jakku would find that the past was not finished with her. The story of Rey and her sabers begins with an encounter, not with a tool, but with a haunted object. When Rey first touched the Skywalker lightsaber in the depths beneath Maz Kanata's castle, the Force did not offer gentle guidance. It struck her with a vision. Corridor screams, Bespin's gantries, the training remote on the Falcon, the snowy forest of Starkiller Base, voices of Jedi and Sith echoing through time. This was not simply a weapon, it was an archive. The blade that had passed from Anakin to Luke now carried imprints of every conflict, every moment of fear, hope and rage bound into the Kyber. Over time, the saber had become a focal point where the light side and the dark side wrestled for the soul of a single family. Later on Crate, and then aboard the Resistance flagship, that legacy quite literally broke. The Skywalker. Saber shattered in Rey's hands, its Kyber crystal, split its hilt torn open in another age. A Jedi artisan might have quietly replaced the core and polished away the damage in this late era. There were no forges on Alum, no formal enclave to guide her instead. Repairing the saber became an act of acceptance. Rey aligned the fractured Kyber within a reforged chassis, binding it with new containment rings and stabilizers. The visible band around the middle of the hilt marked the break rather than hiding the scar. She preserved it as part of the weapon's story, a reminder that even legends can fail and be remade after Exegol. When the last battle with the resurrected Sith Lord had ended, Rey finally laid the Skywalker blade to rest on Tatooine only then. Did she ignite a saber truly? her own constructed from the staff that had followed her through deserts, starships, and war. Its emitter crowned with scavenged plates, its grip wrapped in familiar textures. This new hilt honored her past as a junk trader while declaring her new role as a Jedi. Its yellow blade, a hue once seen among temple guards, hinted at an order that balanced study, guardianship, and combat rather than simple heroics. Even the way it awakened spoke to a different relationship with tradition. The activation mechanism. A rotating ring at the emitter suggested careful design, a practical scavenger's solution built from limited parts and half-remembered lore. This was not a copy of Old Republic elegance or Clone Wars standardization. It was a reconstruction from fragments informed by stories, holo recordings, and one surviving master. In this age, every new lightsaber was both weapon and thesis, a statement about what the Jedi could become after their near extinction for the next 1,000 years. If any sabers endured, they would trace their lineage back through blades like rays, reforged, inherited, and reimagined, each one a small act of resistance against oblivion and a bridge to the forgotten techniques that once defined an entire galactic tradition, beyond Jedi and Sith, Night Sisters, Guardians, and alternative light weapons. Yet even that lineage does not belong to the Jedi alone. Power in the galaxy never flows in a single channel, and the Force has always found new hands to shape it into weapons of light and shadow. Beyond the familiar glow of Jedi and Sith blades, there existed an entire hidden family of focused energy arms, each born from a different culture, a different fear, a different hope. On the mist-shrouded world of Dathomir, the Night Sisters proved this with their spectral energy bows. They were not duelists in the Jedi sense. They were witches, channeling the dark side through Ecor and spellcraft. Their bows drew back on nothing yet, formed arcs of crackling energy that hardened into luminous arrows. Each shot was a ritual act, guided as much by chant and gesture as by aim. This was not the elegant contest of blade against blade. It was ambush sorcery and precision, murder, given a shimmering form elsewhere in the galactic fringe. Warrior traditions bound the Force to more familiar steel blades, axes, and polearms. Some sects learned to sheathe metal in a thin envelope of contained plasma or light side energy, turning ancestral weapons into devastating hybrids. A simple staff could become a blinding rod of power. A ceremonial sword could cleave armor as easily as spirit. In these places, the story of the light weapon began not with Kyber crystals, but with clan heirlooms and battlefield necessity. Temple worlds revealed another variation. Guardians charged with defending sacred halls often carried pikes, halberds, and staves, tipped with compact energy blades or lined with glowing edges. These were not optimized for dueling supremacy. They were built to hold corridors, to bar gateways, to turn narrow bridges into killing grounds. A single guardian with a light pike could keep an army at bay, not through acrobatic flourishes, but through reach discipline and the advantage of terrain over time. Entire styles of combat arose around these tools, blending ancient spearwork with the terrifying bite of contained plasma. This raises a quieter question beneath the noise of galactic war. How many cultures approached the same problem in isolation? How to harness focused energy in the hand of a single warrior? What followed was a tapestry of parallel solutions, from shield projectors that could flash into cutting discs to tonfa-style batons with short, snapping blades. Each design reflected local priorities: ritual over spectacle, defense of shrines over conquest integration with existing martial forms, rather than the pursuit of pure lightsaber dominance taken together. These scattered traditions would shape a broader understanding of what a light weapon could be. The famous Jedi saber and its Sith counterparts were only the most visible branch of a much older, wider tree. For thousands of years, artisans, mystics, and soldiers bent the Force and technology toward the same horizon, a controllable blade of energy. Yet what they found there would change everything. Instead of uniformity, the result was diversity. Every culture left its mark. Every belief system etched a new silhouette in light. In the end, the lightsaber stood at the center of galactic myth, but it never stood alone. It was one voice in a chorus of radiant weapons, each humming with the same dangerous promise that the Force, when focused and armed, could remake the fate of those who dared to wield it, echoes in the forge. What 25,000 years left behind in every modern blade, in that chorus of radiant weapons, every modern lightsaber carries a quieter harmony, an echo of everything that came before power condensed into a single line of fire. But what exactly is hidden in that familiar shape? The answer is that the basic hilt and blade are a museum of galactic history, held in one hand long before sleek cylinders hung from Jedi belts. Warriors dragged heavy protosabers across scorched battlefields. External power packs rode on their hips. Thick cables fed unstable plasma through primitive emitters. What followed was a slow refinement, as engineers learned to fold those bulky systems into the hilt itself. Over time, the external pack shrank, disappeared, and left behind the clean silhouette, seen in the High Republic and beyond. Yet the proportions of a grip long enough for two hands, a guarded emitter, and a single forward blade still carry the DNA of those archaic designs inside the hilt. The story of the Kyber crystal is even older, in forgotten caves before the Republic. Young adepts sat in cold darkness, listening to the Force flow through raw, uncolored crystals. Those early attunement rituals were long meditations guided by chants and visions. The crystal did not. Simply power the weapon it chose. Its partner, modern bonding practices are faster, sometimes assisted by technology, yet the core remains the same. The crystal is found in silence. It is aligned through focus, and the blade becomes an expression of that connection for thousands of years. That quiet moment between hand and crystal would shape how Jedi understood the light side itself on the other side of that divide. The Sith twisted the same process. Synthetic crystals grown in furnaces and natural Kyber bled through pain produced the deep red blades that came to define the dark side. Their power was undeniable, but so was their volatility. Ancient experiments with overcharged matrices and cracked crystals led to snarling, unstable blades, the kind later seen on the sabers of dark warlords and fanatics. Each modern red blade is an heir to those early excesses, humming with barely restrained aggression and a tendency to fail as violently as it strikes. The more exotic forms of contemporary sabers are not inventions of a single age, they are descendants. Crossguards with venting side blades recall forgotten prototypes that tried to tame overheating emitters. Dual blades echo the double-ended weapons first forged in hidden Sith foundries for close quarters. Slaughter variable length settings, once tested by High Republic duelists, now allow modern wielders to shorten a blade in tight corridors or extend it in open duels. Every unusual silhouette seen in recent wars has a shadowed ancestor, buried somewhere in the archives when a modern saber ignites. The result is not just a beam of energy, it is a layered artifact of trial-error belief and bloodshed. Each hum carries the memory of protosaber cables, dragging through ash of crystals, singing in frozen caves of Sith laboratories lit by furnace glow, and of High Republic workshops chasing elegance over raw destruction. Yet the most unsettling truth is this: the next great innovation in lightsaber design may already exist, hidden in the hands of a fringe cult or forgotten remnant, waiting for the next galactic conflict to bring it roaring into view. The sound of history, hums, cracks, and the voices of crystals. Over time, those hidden experiments in metal and plasma left behind something more than new silhouettes on a battlefield. They left echoes, soundscapes of power that lingered in training halls and empty corridors long after the last duel ended. Power defines empires. But what happens when that power can be heard before it is seen? The answer is the hum of a lightsaber. In the earliest days of protosabers, the sound was uneven and hungry. The external power packs wheezed and clicked as energy fought its way through crude conduits into barely stable blades. The story of those first weapons was written in stutters and flares, a harsh buzzing that rose and fell with every step as ancient Force warriors dragged their tethered sabers across ruined stone. By the height of the Old Republic, the tone had changed in Jedi temples. A well-tuned blade carried a steady purr, a calm, unwavering note that reflected both crystal harmony and disciplined maintenance. Kyber of high quality channeled the light side cleanly. Power modulation circuits smoothed the flow. Emitter matrices were precise, their geometry shaping the plasma column and therefore the voice of the weapon. A long, thin blade sang higher. A broader, heavy blade spoke in a lower, confident hum. Sith laboratories told a different story. Synthetic and bled crystals, twisted by the dark side, produced harsher sounds. Their energy output was often more violent, and the blade answered with a ragged snarl. Unstable. Crossguards spat and cracked as excess power vented through side vents. Double-bladed sabers turned that aggression into a whirling chorus, each rotation converting raw rage into a rising howl. What followed was a sound that unsettled even veteran Jedi before the first strike landed in quiet halls across the galaxy. Masters trained students to listen as much as to see. In a dark chamber with eyes closed, a Jedi could tell friend from foe by tone. Alone the measured thrum of a Guardian's standard saber, the agile higher pitch of a consular's refined blade, the distorted growl of a corrupted crystal announcing a Sith long before the red glow reached the doorway. In those moments, sound became a map of threat and intention on battlefields. The effect multiplied for thousands of years. Massed engagements between Jedi and Sith produced a mechanical music. Dozens, sometimes hundreds of blades, igniting at once, created a rising chord that cut through artillery and starfighter engines. Each clash added sharp, percussive cracks as magnetic fields met and parted. For the next 1,000 years, veterans of such wars carried those layered harmonies in memory, hearing them again in dreams long after peace. Returned even now in the far reaches of the galactic rim, a single abandoned saber might still rest, where its owner fell occasionally brushed by a drifting current of the Force. Its emitter flickers to life for a moment. The lonely hum travels down an empty corridor, carrying with it every jewel, every oath, every betrayal that came before a fading note, waiting for the next hand to answer its call. Extinction and renewal. Why lightsabers never truly disappear. In the quiet that follows that fading hum, a pattern begins to emerge across galactic history. At first glance, each fallen saber seems to mark an ending, a final duel, a last stand, a forgotten war, but looked at from a distance. The story of the lightsaber is not a straight line from invention to obsolescence. It is a repeating curve rising into prominence, falling into near silence, and then returning again when the galaxy has almost forgotten its sound for thousands of years. Entire eras were defined by the glow of these blades. The early Force Wars of the Protosaber Age, the Old Republic's great conflicts with Sith empires, the Clone Wars, when sabers became symbols on every battlefield. Each of these high points was followed by collapse. Jedi purges, Sith schisms, Imperial crackdowns and long stretches where only a scattered handful of warriors still carried a functioning weapon. At times it seemed the tradition had finally broken, yet what followed was never true. Extinction, only dormancy over time. The reason becomes clear. Lightsabers vanish from public view, but their memory and their means of construction are almost never destroyed. Entirely hidden caches slumber beneath ruined temples, sealed within Jedi vaults and Sith tombs. Kyber crystals rest in untouched caverns, humming softly in the dark, waiting ancient forges on worlds once central to Jedi or Sith power sit cold but intact, their focusing arrays and alignment chambers preserved under layers of dust. Even when an order burns its archives, there is always one holocron overlooked, one schematic etched into stone, one master who taught a single apprentice. Before vanishing in these quiet centuries, the sabers returned through individuals rather than institutions. A scavenger on a forgotten battlefield finds a cracked hilt and wonders how it once worked. A scholar on a remote world deciphers a fragment of a forge. Ritual recorded in an old holocron. A Force-sensitive wanderer hears a faint call from a Kyber crystal buried in a cave and follows it. What they found there would change everything, not for the entire galaxy at once, but for a small circle of students, a clan, a hidden sect, who learn again how to bind plasma to crystal and crystal to will. Beneath all of this runs a deeper current. Many Jedi and even some Sith have believed that the Force itself refuses to let the lightsaber disappear entirely. When great galactic storms gather, when the balance between dark side and light side tips, too far in one direction, blades begin to reappear, drawn from vaults, reassembled from fragments, or built anew in forgotten forges. At such moments, the saber becomes more than a weapon. It becomes a visible line of energy connecting past to present, a reminder that power can be focused, but never truly contained, taken together. These cycles would shape not just orders and empires, but the rhythm of galactic history. Each resurgence of the lightsaber marks the opening of a new chapter, and each apparent ending is only a pause before the next ignition. Somewhere in the dark, as the timeline moves forward, another such pause is approaching, and the next rekindling is already quietly preparing to begin. Sleeping blades, ruins, relics, and the quiet future of the lightsaber. As the timeline moves forward and that next rekindling quietly prepares to begin, there is a softer image waiting beneath the tales of war and empire and shattered orders, a vision not of armies in motion, but of stillness, of forgotten chambers and silent hulls, where the last witnesses of ancient battles rest in the dark. In those places, the story of the lightsaber does not end. It simply sleeps deep beneath worlds that once shook with Jedi and Sith duels. There are temples whose doors have long since collapsed, their murals worn smooth by sandstorms and time. Yet within their buried halls, deactivated sabers lie in drifts of dust. Their emitters choke their hilts, dulled by ages of neglect, while their Kyber hearts remain clear and unbroken. The same is true in the skeletons of crashed ships, half swallowed by jungle or frozen into glaciers. Corridors eaten and twisted by impact, where a single hilt might have rolled under a shattered console and never been claimed again. Over time, metal corrodes and stone fractures, banners crumble to threads, and even the names of great masters vanish from galactic memory. But Kyber endures. The crystal does not rust or rot, its lattice still humming faintly in the Force, waiting for the circuit to be completed once more. In the wreckage of a forgotten Republic cruiser, an archaic protosaber with its severed power cable might rest beside a more refined weapon. From a later age, their designs different, yet bound by the same luminous core. Both blades, dormant yet not dead, only paused between bearers in that distant future. The next hand to reach for these relics will not belong to any Jedi or Sith whose deeds fill the history. It will be an unknown wanderer on a dust-choked world, a scavenger sheltering from a storm in the ribs of an ancient walker, or a quiet seeker tracing echoes through a ruined temple. What followed was never written in any archive, yet the Force will be there. A subtle pressure, a gentle pull, drawing that hand toward a forgotten hilt that should, by all logic, be nothing more than scrap. When that grip finally closes, circuits, long broken, will realign, dust will fall away. A crystal that has not known a voice in thousands of years will answer with a sudden flare of connection. And in that moment, the line from the first crude power pack Protosabers to this single reclaimed weapon will become unbroken again. Every war, every lost form, every experiment in dark side alchemy and light side refinement will whisper through that one rising blade as it snaps into being in the shadows of a ruin. There is a quiet comfort in this, that history never truly disappears. It only thins and settles, leaving traces in stone, in metal, and in memory, carried by the Force for the next 1,000 years. Knowledge that was once lived cannot be entirely erased, a training remnant in the way a reclaimed blade moves a half-remembered stance, suggested by the hilt's balance, a color in the crystal that hints at passions and choices long past. And if one saber can carry so much forward in silence, the question becomes, what else is still waiting in the dark, unclaimed, unignited, and poised to turn the next forgotten ruin into the beginning of another age, from first spark to final ember, weaving the entire 25,000-year thread for 25,000 years. A single sound has threaded through galactic history, the low, patient hum of contained light. It began as a struggle, not for elegance, but for control. The first Protosabers were proof of concept more burden than blessing. Heavy emitters wired to external power packs, warriors dragging cables across scorched stone as they tried to leash raw plasma with imperfect Kyber and crude field projectors. What followed was clumsy, desperate experimentation, but it worked well enough to change war forever around those early Force Wars. When Jedi and Darkside adepts first crossed blades, the weapon was still more relic than standard issue, yet even then the pattern was set. Each generation pushed the design a little further. Over time, engineers and Force sensitives folded the power cells into the hilt, learned to stabilize the magnetic fields, and tuned Kyber crystals through meditation until the cable fell away, and the modern self-contained lightsaber was born compact, alive, responsive to the touch of the Force for the next 1,000 years. And beyond, the Sith treated this new blade as a canvas. They forged synthetic crystals and bled natural ones until they screamed red. They fused emitters into double-bladed staves for maximum offense in cramped tombs and starship corridors. They carved unstable crossguards that spat energy from lateral vents, turning a flaw into a symbol of defiance in their hands. The saber was not merely a weapon. It was a declaration that the dark side would shape the very tools of conflict during the High Republic. The same weapon told a different story. Elegant, cross-guarded hilts, ceremonial pommels, and gilded inlays reflected an order at relative peace. Jedi carried sabers that mirrored their roles as explorers and diplomats, as much as guardians. Every detail, from polished focusing rings to carefully balanced grips, suggested restraint and harmony. Then the Clone Wars shattered that calm mass production, and standardized parts spread through the arsenals of Jedi generals and Sith infiltrators alike. The lightsaber became a uniform silhouette marching across a galactic battlefield under the Empire. The design was twisted again. Inquisitors spun ring-bladed sabers that could whirl into shields or propellers. The Darksaber resurfaced as an ancient Mandalorian claim to power a flat black blade humming with a history of Jedi theft and Mandalorian rebellion. Even here, the old themes remained: individuality fighting against standardization, spirituality pulled toward weaponization. Every alteration carried the imprint of a doctrine or a fear. After Endor and the fall of that empire, the cycle folded back on itself. Scavenged hilts, reforged blades, and half-remembered manuals brought the past into the present. A single recovered crystal might have once burned in a High Republic defender's hand, then passed through a Sith laboratory before sleeping in a ruin for centuries until another Jedi found it. What they found there would change everything, not through spectacle, but through continuity. A reminder that no saber exists in isolation across all these eras, from the first tethered spark to the latest reclaimed ember. The lightsaber has remained a quiet record of choices. Each war, each order, each lone tinkerer etched a new layer into its form and function, and somewhere in the next forgotten cache or buried temple, another variation waits ready to turn the long unbroken thread of this weapon's history toward its next unseen shape, the quiet hum at the end, letting the history fade into the background onward through forgotten vaults and ruined academies. That next unseen shape waits. But for now, the long thread can loosen. Imagine a galaxy without suns for a moment, a vast dark canvas where only memory exists. Then, in that silence, every lightsaber that ever was ignites at once. Ancient Protosabers dragging their power cables, refined Jedi blades from the High Republic, unstable Sith experiments screaming with red fire, the Darksaber's flat, black edge cutting a strange outline against the void. For a breath, they all hang there, suspended in the dark, a galactic constellation of metal and light. Each blade is the story of a choice, of a war, of an order that rose or fell. Then, slowly, they begin to wink out. The first to fade are the archaic packs that once tethered warriors in the earliest Force Wars, their heavy designs giving way to cleaner forms. Old Republic standards follow, the disciplined blue and green lines that once filled entire battlefields withdrawing into nothing. What followed was not a sudden darkness, but a gentle dimming. Over time, the more exotic shapes recede as well. Double-bladed weapons that once whirled in close quarters vanish. Crossguards and spinning rings used by Imperial hunters fold into the night. Even the rare, flat glow of the Darksaber, carried through Mandalorian conflict and Jedi halls alike, finally narrows to a hairline and closes. The Grand Empire era clashes that would shape so much of galactic history compress into a faint afterimage, as if seen from unimaginably far away. Names soften at the edges. The exact dates blur. Individual designs that once demanded attention become a drifting haze of remembered color. It no longer matters which Sith Lord bled, which crystal, or which Jedi artisan perfected which emitter matrix. For thousands of years of refinement, improvisation, and desperation resolve into a single impression, a weapon humming its way through ages of dark and light, then receding. In that imagined void, one last blade remains, distant, small, a single, steady hum floating in the dark, neither demanding nor threatening, simply existing as a quiet thread of the Force. It does not need to be identified. It does not need a name, or an era, or a documented place in history. It is only the echo of everything that came before, the residue of all those choices and all those forgotten hands. The story of this weapon has been told. Every major turn, every strange experiment, every lost technique has taken its place in the long line. Nothing depends on holding each detail in perfect focus. The narrative rests now, complete, enough to sleep. Whenever attention returns, it will still be here, waiting in the background, unchanged. This act of mercy would reshape galactic history for a restless mind, the permission to let the details drift. So the pacing of this history slows, lengthening and smoothing, less a march of events and more a tide that has finally reached a calm shore. The lightsaber's journey becomes a kind of lullaby, a low metal and light refrain that can play quietly behind dreams. Somewhere, that last distant hum continues, but it no longer calls to battle or to study. It is simply there, a safe, fading melody, as the long arc of its history settles into the dark and grows still. Drifting with the blade, soft closure, an optional return. In that stillness, the long arc of the weapon's history narrows down to a single quiet point, a thread of light that has finally been allowed to rest. The story of the lightsaber has moved from crude proto-sabers and external power packs to elegant, blades that answered the will of Jedi and Sith, and now it simply settles into silence. The great galactic conflicts that once roared around it fall away until only a faint memory of motion remains over time. The mind begins to treat those thousands of years of war and empire and fragile peace as a distant mural rather than a battlefield. Faces blur names, soften the exact dates of ancient Force wars or Sith uprisings, stop mattering. Each era becomes another brushstroke in one continuous band of color, running from the first unstable plasma blades to the last careful, reforged hilts held by lone wanderers in the outer rim for anyone still drifting in that space between waking and sleep. The path through this history is now familiar. The early proto-sabers, with their humming cables and heavy packs, the rise of standardized Jedi weapons during the Old Republic, the experimental fury of Sith, designs from double-bladed staffs to crackling, unstable reds. Each stage has been walked once and can be walked again with less effort and less strain. What followed was a kind of map etched gently into memory. Another time, attention may return to a single corner of that map, perhaps to the archaic workshops where Kyber crystals first met metal housings, or to the shadowed laboratories where the dark side twisted synthetic crystals into harsher light, perhaps to the quiet aftermaths where a single deactivated hilt lay in the dust of a ruined temple while the wider galactic war moved on. Without it, the route back to those moments would shape itself more easily now, already charted already. Calm beyond this single tale. There are other slow histories waiting, other calm passages through Jedi orders, rising and falling, Sith empires, vanishing into legend, and the Force itself flowing beneath it. All, their pace, is the same, measured and steady. Their focus is the same long view of power and consequence, but there is no urgency in that knowledge. No demand, only the possibility of returning when the mind seeks another quiet current to follow. For now, the lightsaber itself can be allowed to vanish from attention. Imagine it resting on a stone altar in an abandoned hall or beside a simple bedroll under a low ceiling of rock. The metal is cool. The crystal within is silent. The switch has not been touched for a very long time. Outside, the galaxy continues its endless motion. But here, the weapon that once sang in so many battles is only an object at peace. Eventually, even that last image can fade. The sense of a hilt, the thought of a crystal, the memory of a Hummel slipping into the same darkness that once held the first unknown stars. The Force remains, but the need to follow its history falls quiet. The room returns, the breath slows, and the story of the lightsaber drifts away into the stillness, waiting beyond these final words.